and welcome to Flap TV. We're the area's largest Facebook group dedicated to politics. Fitchburg-Leominster All Politics jumps from your computer screen to your television screen. For this episode, we are honored to have with us two guests that many would consider to be the biggest advocates and cheerleaders for their respective cities. He is the longest-serving sitting mayor in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Leominster Mayor Dean Mazzarella, and the host of DFN, local businesswoman, candidate for city councilor at large, Sam Squailia.
Hi.
Thank you so much for both joining us today. So
you wouldn't want to see me in my cheerleading outfit, though.
Well, Cindy has pom-poms, so we can let you, borrow those.
I think I remember that. Yes.
So we have a lot of issues to get to, so let's get right to it. The 2016 election brought out a lot of new voters and into the political process. And now, a year later, a lot of those people that were brought into the process are thinking of running for office themselves. But in order to run for office, you first have to get on the ballot. And ballot access laws are different from city to city, state to state. And they are also very different in the Twin Cities. In Fitchburg, if you want to run for citywide politics, whether it be councilor at large or mayor, you just go out and you get yourself 50 signatures from anywhere in the city. Something that can easily be done outside of a supermarket in a couple hours or even at a weekend barbecue in your neighborhood. Leominster handles things a little bit differently. Leominster makes you work for it. If you want to run for councilor at large in Leominster, you need 200 signatures, 4 times as many as Fitchburg, and they have to be from across different wards. You have to show geographic viability. If you want to run for mayor of Leominster, you need 300 signatures, 6 times the amount of what you need in Fitchburg. And again, you have to get them from different wards in the city. So which city has it right, Leominster or Fitchburg? Michael Della Monaca.
Well, I'll just use the attorney's favorite answer. It depends.
It sounds like a commercial. An answer.
It depends on. I thought about this. It really depends on the race, in my opinion. Okay, city council, school committee, especially the wards, but even the at-large positions. Look, we're trying to encourage participation. We're trying to encourage people to run for office. You're not going to succeed unless you get out there and talk to voters anyway, okay? But to get on the ballot, I can see an argument for somewhat less than the Leominster benchmark. 50 signatures, 100 signatures, something like that. I can see it. Something like mayor, the chief executive in the city, or I would say yes, you need to really. 50 signatures in Fitchburg is ridiculous, in my opinion. At least 150, 200 signatures to me seems reasonable. Even 300 in Leominster, in terms of the way Leominster does it for mayor, I can see it. But some of those not lesser seats, but the city council, school committee, some of those legislative body seats, a little fewer than Leominster wouldn't be a bad thing.
Sam.
I don't think that it's really an important conversation, frankly, right now. Fitchburg's had this low bar for so long, and it really hasn't cultivated a whole crop of new candidates. We don't have a lot of candidates that aren't qualified running. In fact, we don't have a lot of candidates at all that are running. This year, we have a particularly large amount of candidates, but in 2015, we really didn't have any. We had, what did we have running for city council? 13 out of 11 seats, something like that. So I don't necessarily think that the 50 signatures in Fitchburg is an important topic at this point.
Mayor Mazzarella.
Well, I think it's, regardless of what it is, I mean, we always try to get as many as we can, right? Our team's always like, yeah, let's get as many as we can and break the record from last time. Because it gives you an opportunity to speak to the voter. Ask them for their signature. It's a big deal. I send them a thank you card after saying, thank you for signing my nomination papers. It's a big deal to me. I don't know. I guess, you want to take it serious, right? I mean, it's a serious job. You want to take it serious. So the person that goes out and gets 55, I don't know how much they took it, how serious they took it, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing either. So I guess it's everyone's going to be, you can view it 1,000 different ways. The reality is if you're passionate about it, you're really excited about it, you're going to go out and get as many as you can, whether it's 10 that you have to get, 50 or 500, right? I mean, you're going to go out and pound the pavement because people want to see you work hard. When they think you've taken their vote for granted, that doesn't go off so well either.
Cindy.
I actually agree. I think the more the better, to be honest. I think if you're going to be out there in the public, you want people to know who you are, and the more you're knocking on doors and talking to people and getting signatures, they're getting familiar with you. A lot of people who run, nobody knows who they are. So to get 50 signatures, yeah, it gets you on the ballot, but are people really paying attention? So I think you should show initiative. I mean, maybe not 300 for mayor certainly, but for a city council, at least 100, 150. I would think you get out there and do the work.
Now, to Sam's point about the practical implications of signatures, only 50 running for mayor not being a big deal. This year in Fitchburg, you have a candidate for mayor who no one's ever heard of, who, the newspaper even called me up because they had no idea who he was. He has made no public statements. He has no Facebook page, no website. The only thing we do know about him is that he was arrested a few weeks ago for a shooting down in Worcester. Mm-hmm. Now, so he may be going out there and getting his name on the ballot as a gag, as a joke. We don't know. There's rumors he doesn't even live in the city. If he does get on the ballot and gets his 50 signatures from probably his friends down in the holding cell as he's waiting to be arraigned, that's going to cost $25,000 to $30,000 for the city to have a preliminary election because it's the third candidate. So there are practical implications. And also, if you have these people on the ballot that really aren't serious candidates, and you have a debate here on FATV or LATV, that also cuts into the time of the serious candidates for people to make those decisions.
You know what, and slightly different direction, the reason I disagree with you a little bit is because what Fitchburg did have, maybe they didn't have enough involvement in general. One thing they did have, I really haven't seen it the last few election cycles, there were one or two people who ran for mayor as a thing. And because the threshold was so low, there were a couple of folks who every single election year you would see their name, year after year after year, you would see them on the ballot from and absolutely had no chance. Okay? Yep. And I think, so ties into a little bit of what Kevin said. You might want to say the candidate name because there's a couple of candidates that are running that are not the incumbent. So
I forget his name.
Okay. All right. But the not Dan Olson candidate.
Correct.
Yeah.
Alex Vera.
Alex Vera, that's his name, yes.
Right.
Yes, that was the one that was arrested.
Right.
With the gun. Someone else used his gun in a shooting in Worcester.
Yeah.
Gotta hate when that happens.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a tough one.
And we also have a candidate running for mayor of Leominster that found himself in a jail cell also recently for a domestic incident that happened on the side of a road after a night of clubbing. So just to close this out, I don't think that there will be a contested race in Leominster this year. And
Never know.
Will be, and there
You never
will be
know.
one in Fitchburg.
You never know.
He
But I
has
think
still
a lot
been
of it
pretty
is,
active on
but
Facebook.
a lot
Listen,
of it is the ballot access.
My motto has always been, you know this, Kevin, I campaign by doing the job.
You do.
So I never wait till September. I never wait to see if somebody's going to pull their papers. I never wait to see who turns them in August. I always campaign by doing the job because 2 years goes by so quick.
It does.
That if you start putting things aside and forgetting what you said you were going to do and what the things that are important to the people that elect you, then all of a sudden you start pulling out all the news articles and what did I say I was going to do in September? And it's too late for that. You can't start campaigning in September. You've got to campaign all the time by getting the job done.
So far for city council and mayor's races, we have 33 candidates that have pulled papers in Fitchburg. 13 candidates have pulled papers in Leominster.
Kind of ironic, though, because I think you and I were talking about one time when it was 37 people pulled papers in Leominster, and then at the time in Fitchburg there were 13 or 12 or something people that pulled.
Right.
I think if one of these undesirable candidates wants to get the 150 signatures instead of 50, they're going to do it.
Right.
It's really not that. 50 signatures, like you said, you can get it in an afternoon.
On a Friday night at any bar, you can get
Yeah,
50
but
But
signatures.
300 is a little tougher, and 300 help you weed
Yes,
out the field
it
of
does.
the ones who would do more to embarrass the reputation of the city than to build it up.
Good point.
Issue 2, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts faces a dire crisis when it comes to its public pension system. According to a CNBC report, the Bay State has saved just 62 cents on the dollar to fund pension liabilities. The report also noted that our public pension shortfall in this state is at $94.5 billion. And I did not misread that. That's almost $100 billion of a pension shortfall. Now, we have retirees in Leominster who have not received a cost of living adjustment in many years. They are demanding more, and very loudly. And you also, on the other side, have taxpayer watchdog groups who are calling for spending to be reined in and benefits to be reined in order to stop the bleeding. And meanwhile, cities and towns are just drowning in pension debt that are a behemoth in their budget and are threatening massive cuts in local services. Sam, what needs to be done with the Massachusetts pension system to get this crisis under control?
Well, that's a strong question. Well, our pension payout system right now, our pension payouts are unsustainable, especially in Fitchburg. Our pension fund is currently funded at somewhere around 42-43%, and we're expected to be fully funded by 2032. Whereas in Leominster's pension system is paid like 80% funded, right? And they're set to pay out to fully fund their pension system by 2022, I believe it is.
Well, hopefully sooner than that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so Fitchburg at 2032, right now, that's increasing our payments every year. That's figuring on an 8% return. That's figuring on every year we raise the tax levy, the full 2.5%. So we're paying another $1 million every year, to the budget. And that's also figuring that our tax base, our property, rates are not going to decrease. Because if they decrease, then and if our revenue sources don't increase, we're in trouble. And that's also, the defined benefit system that we have, for pensions. It's our retirement age minimums, contribute to that. We have a longer life expectancy of our pensions, of our retirees. So I think what we probably need to do is to work in the state to switching to a defined contribution system, like a 401k, like they do in the private sector. We might need to cap pension earnings, so that someone's not making, they work for a job at $30,000 a year, and the last 2 years they work at a $60,000 job, so they're making that. And we might need to increase the retirement age.
Mayor Mazzarella?
Well, I mean, those numbers basically mean that there are a lot of cities and towns in the state that are basically bankrupt. They're underwater. So same thing with your automobile, right? You got a 5-year, 6-year loan on it. You bought a car. After 4 years, you start to have transmission and engine problems. It's no good. You have to get rid of it. You owe more on that. We're getting very close to be paid down. And the retirees gone 8 years without an increase. We can afford a little bit of an increase for them. There's no question about that. It's got to be more of a balance. On the other hand, we haven't gone up on our insurance rates in 8 years for them. And anybody knows who's paying any kind of insurance, that's pretty critical. And especially for the retirees. The older you get, the more medical you need, the more pharmaceuticals you need and prescriptions. So we've kept that at that. The other piece of that is the state will not change the law on health care. So we have somebody that I see her writing horrible, nasty letters about me to the editor all the time about not giving the retirees, an increase in their pension, as if that's just my only job. In other words, I'm the only one responsible for that. There's a pension system. It's basically separate from the city with a separate group. And she worked 10 years, 4 months. She now will get Blue Cross Blue Shield, fairly young lady, will get Blue Cross Blue Shield pay for her for the rest of her life. Okay, and if she's married, has a spouse, and something happens to her, her spouse will get Blue Cross Blue Shield. People are living now till in their 90s. We've had people retire 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, the difference today is that when I started the police department, your dad was a cop, a lot of those cops didn't make much money at all. I mean, they didn't have overtime, they didn't have details, they got paid nothing. For them, the pension was everything. They come out of the service, took the job, didn't pay as much, but had a pension. Well, those pensions now haven't kept up, obviously, after all those years, because they've been retired for 40 years. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, it's got to be a combination of the two. Maybe a retirement a package, a pension system, and then I tell all employees now when we hire them, don't count on your pension to keep you alive. You really have to invest in other places. So it's those two things, the Blue Cross Blue Shield or the health care that cities have to give after 10 years. So it's also not fair. You had Robin Dantini, who worked for the city over 40 years. She gets the same benefit as somebody that worked for 10 years and 4 months in terms of health care. That's not fair. It needs to be prorated. If you work 10 years, then maybe it's 20%. And then maybe it's the 100% policy, which is 75-25, to somebody that worked there for 40 years. So that has to be changed. But Cities have to, I mean, right now in the GASB, you have to start listing your unfunded liabilities as a unfunded liability. You have to start listing it as a liability on your balance sheets. So that's going to change things. The Pioneer
Is that going
Institute-
to impact bond ratings?
Yes, absolutely. It's going to now, absolutely. The last line of the Pioneer Institute, when they did their study on pension obligations, the last line said, before you buy your home, check to see what your unfunded liabilities are, because as a taxpayer, sooner or later, you're going to pick up that tab. When ours is paid off, millions will be free back to the taxpayers, or we decide to use it in other places. It's real money. It's not invisible money that you just sort of shift around on paper. This is real dollars it's costing people by not having that paid down.
Somewhere around $10 million a year.
It's huge.
Cindy?
I agree. I think we need to go private with it. I think one of the first things I would do if I had a say in it is take all new hires and put them in a 401k plan. Don't even get them in the pension system. And maybe offer a buyout to people that are already in the system. I mean, some of the older ones obviously might not be interested, but some of the younger ones might take a little bit of money and then offer them a 401k plan to invest it in, take a little bit more control of their own finances. But anybody who, like you said, you can't rely on Social Security as a pension anymore. You have to do something besides that. So people need to be involved in their own pension plans as well. So I think privatization's a way to go. I don't see how the state's going to be able to continue to go this route. I don't know how cities will be able to do it.
For example,
they have to do something.
The city of Fitchburg, if they use their entire Proposition 2.5 levy, will raise taxes by an additional $1.85 million. So $1.8 million is the maximum that Fitchburg can raise taxes. Pension and healthcare cost increases alone are $1.9 million.
If you look at our healthcare cost increased in just the teachers,
Sure.
it's about $700,000. Teachers' salaries and steps in, not teachers, but everybody, is $2 million. So you got $2.7 million. A Prop 2.5 increase brings in just about the same, 1.7. So you're already behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
But I have to say though, for the pension system is a good idea in the sense that it brings in a lot of good, competent people who look at the pension program as so I'm not making as much money, but boy, the pension is good. But what I'm saying is, you got to fund it properly, right? Because it's a benefit. And secondly, as you said, you've got to find something else. Don't count on that pension because it's not keeping up with inflation. That's the problem with the retirees now, is they retired 40 years ago, and that pension hasn't kept up.
So we have to go to break. Quick question, yes or no. When we look at the unfunded liabilities, Fitchburg has an unfunded pension debt of $138 million. We look at all these increases. When the average taxpayer who's paying for all this and seeing their services cut sees state retirees and city retirees being able to retire with a full pension at 55 years old, when they see the Blue Cross Blue Shield for the rest of their lives, do they have a legitimate gripe in that the pension system for the public workers are more generous than for private citizens? Do they have a legitimate gripe?
I think it's more along the lines that Fitchburg really has underfunded their system for so long. We shouldn't be at 42.5% right now. We should be, we should have better, managed.
Is 55 a
our
legit
retirement.
age to retire?
Again, I think we should increase that retirement age, maybe tied to Social Security.
Yeah.
The biggest thing for me is that healthcare benefit. You're giving a health care benefit for somebody that's been here 10 years, 2 months, 10 years, 4 months, and now if they decide to retire at 55 and they live till 85 or whatever, City of Leominster is taxpayer. That's bigger to me than the pension system because it's so unfair.
Huge,
At least
yeah.
the pension system is fair in terms of all employees.
Healthcare
And the
is such a
healthcare cost
question
is
mark
just
right
keeps
now.
going up. So
Part of the
it's-
problem, though, is, how we got this whole unfunded liability is fewer people are staying till the max. Fewer people are staying till 65 years old. People are leaving sooner than that, which means they're getting paid out faster, which means the system can't recover quick enough.
It's 55 years old and 10 years or 20 years, correct, to be eligible?
Well, for police and fire, it's
Yeah.
55. It's 55 and 32 years is kind of like the maximum. So it depends on what department it is. But yeah, those are pretty much the formulas.
We're going to have to cut out for a break. We'll be back in 1 minute. I know after listening to this discussion, you need to go top off whatever you're drinking, and I understand that. So we will be back in 1 minute. Stay with us. Issue 3. These days, the left and right can't agree on much, but one thing I think we can all agree on is that as a nation, we're probably more divided now than we have been in a long time. For 8 years, one side tried to obstruct and delegitimize President Obama at every opportunity. And now that the tables are turned, the other side is getting a taste of their own medicine. And we've seen a lot of protests. When we saw Black Lives Matter and Occupy Wall Street blocking highways, we heard outcries of how that is not an acceptable form of dissent and protest. And then when we saw protesters not blocking highways, but just holding signs and heckling politicians, we also heard cries of that's an unacceptable form of protest. Just recently, we saw students silently get up and walk out of a commencement address when Vice President Mike Pence began to speak. They did not disrupt, they did not heckle, they quietly left. We also saw 8th grade students in Washington, D.C. who went and sat on a curb rather than take a class picture with Speaker of the House Paul Ryan. And we saw outrage about that online also, with people saying that was disrespectful and not an appropriate sign of respect or dissent. So the question is, if everything from blocking roads to quietly sitting on a curb is disrespectful and not acceptable form of protest, what is an acceptable form of protest these days? Mayor Mazzarella.
Well, I think, maybe this is just I'm getting older or whatever, but when the whole group gets up and just leaves, it means they're not listening. And that's half the problem, is that nobody wants to listen to anybody. All we want to do is prove our point. All the people that are convinced on either side that, whether the president's a bad guy or a good guy, all the polls have said right along, nobody's changing their mind. So when we get into these protests and everything, whose mind are we changing? We're convincing each other because we already agree with each other. So in my sense, it's like, how do you really, and I think honestly, Governor Baker is the kind of the elected official where some of the hardcore, Republicans aren't happy with him because he doesn't hold a line on that. But the reality is there are two sides. This city is split, the country is split right down the middle. Somebody has to bring this together to get people to say, look, okay, you want to talk about student loans? Let's sit down and have this conversation about student loans. Some people think education should be free or whatever, and then other people are like, well, how can we offer something free? Nothing's free. Somebody has to pay for it. And nobody can seem to bring the two groups together. Everybody just wants to hear what they want to hear. And there, I think, is the biggest of the problems, is nobody wants to listen anymore. We just want to secure and validate our position on it. Like, see, I'm right. See the article in the Nebraska Times, population of like 10,000 people in town, and one newspaper that comes out once a month? See what they wrote in the article? That backs up my position. It's all foolishness. We don't have to back it up. We're just talking to ourselves. We have to get together and say, look, what is the issue here in this country? What are we trying to resolve? I don't care what it is, foreign policy, oil, jobs, whatever. How do we get together on this stuff? And that's not happening.
Cindy?
I agree. I mean, I'm all for protest. If you feel you need to do that, then do it. But at some point, it's like, why? I don't understand the violent protest is what bothers me. UC Berkeley recently, there was Ann Coulter was supposed to go and speak. I know a lot of people don't like her. They don't want to listen to what she has to say. Whether you like her or not, she has a right to speak. People have a right to go see her. And they created such a violent riot that they had to cancel it for security purposes. So what's free speech about that? You're blocking her free speech for your free speech, and it goes both ways. You don't want to listen to it? Don't go. Period. I think you have every right to walk out of anything if you want, but like he says, you're not hearing the other side of the story. So as long as you're doing it peacefully, you stop blocking highways. I'm sorry, that's absolutely wrong. You start committing crimes. That's wrong. Just destroying the streets. You just make yourself look like fools. So if you want to protest, stand out there with a sign, walk down the street, boycott a meeting, do it. More power to you. But maybe you might want to listen to the other side, and maybe you might learn something.
Michael?
Well, let's not build a straw man here. Protest is protesting, okay? And negotiating is negotiating, and discussing is discussing. It's three different types of things. So we can't say that people can't protest because they should be listening, because people who want to protest, maybe for whatever reason, they know all the facts, they've taken everything in, and they've made up their mind. And good for them, because the right for someone to speak is similar to the right to someone to protest. Obviously, I would be against and am against anything that obstructs traffic, obstructs people, affects other people. in terms of, or anything violent, obviously, that again, you are putting people in harm's way, or you know, a violent protest or obstruction of traffic or any of those things, obviously. But these silent protests, it's a factor of life. We can't just dismiss it and say, well, you know, they should be listening more. Well, you know, maybe they've chosen to protest. That's their right to do so. What we need, quite honestly, is we need more politicians at the national level and at the state level. We do better in Massachusetts, granted, but at the national level, especially the president, well, we have dividers. We're electing dividers, we're not electing uniters, okay? And so, hey, maybe that's what we need. Maybe someday, someone, whether it be a Democrat or a Republican, is going to come along and actually be a uniter for once, instead of a divider, instead of sparking, whether it be violent protests or nonviolent protests. And then maybe you're going to see some more dialogue. Then maybe you're going to see some more people talking. If you're going to actually have a head of state or a head of the federal government, the chief executive of the federal government, actually, actually promoting dialogue.
Sam?
Yeah. Divisiveness is a problem. But dissent is patriotism, right?
Yes.
What is patriotism? It's a vigorous support of one's country, and our country, America. What does it mean to be an American? It means to have freedoms. So if you are fighting for the freedoms of this country that you believe are ultimate, then dissent really is patriotism. That you are exercising your right to be an American. You are proving what it is to be an American by dissenting. Having said that, peaceful protests are better, but it's really situational. You know, blocking traffic does seem like it's universally condemned because it can cause harm and violence. Violence is also universally condemned, generally.
It's looked at as radical, and that's what people get upset about. It's like, look, I got to get to work every day. You know, and now these people are disturbing. Somebody might need to get in an ambulance and get from one end of Boston to another, a big city, to another hospital that's got better medical equipment. Now people are blocking the roads. No, protest is fine. It's not an issue. But I don't think exactly everyone's listening the way we all think they are. I think they're getting bits and pieces from a bunch of different places. And again, it supports their argument. And what I'm saying is, that takes a lot of energy to do that. Why not put the energy into sitting down and seeing where we can't find common ground? That's my only point.
So don't block the rotaries in Fitchburg.
Do whatever you want. I mean,
Mayor
don't block
Mazzarella,
it.
just go
Mayor
around
Mazzarella,
with the
thank you
rotaries.
so much for joining us. Sam Squailia, thank you for joining us. That's going to do it for this edition of Flap TV. Join the discussion online, Fitchburg-Leominster, All Politics on the Facebook group, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You know what flap spelled backwards is?
Pal?
Pal. Right? Pal.